Good morning. Welcome to the morning market briefing. Today is Monday, July 13th, 2026. It's great to be back. And it seems like I could have just recycled a lot of the topics that we've been talking about for the last 3 months. I don't want to belabor a lot of these points today because I think a lot of it is noise at this point, certainly as long as the market's concerned. I think that people are very concerned, and rightly so, for what's going on in the Middle East. But what we're going to do is really just kind of focus on the oil impact, because that's really what's going to impact markets. And right now, I'm sure you saw the headlines over the weekend, and the Hormuz Strait was open and then it was shut. And then CENTCOM said that the strait is now open to, quote, all vessels seeking to lawfully transit. And then they continue to say that U.S. forces are positioned and prepared to ensure that freedom of navigation remains available despite unwarranted Iranian aggression, harassment, threats, and arbitrary decisions. Iran does not control the strait. Traffic is flowing. To which I say, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I don't really know. But oil markets are saying that oil is flowing, but there's still some tension there.
Yeah, just a couple minutes ago, Iranian state media said that the strait is closed again on Twitter. So your guess is as good as mine, but I suspect it's going to continue to be a point of contention. And I mean, it's the fog of war, right? We're not over there. We can't see anything. Who knows what's really happening?
Yep.
Both sides are adamant that whatever they're saying is correct, though. I would tend to side with our own, intelligence operation, but who knows?
Yeah. Speaking of defense, Lindsey Graham had been a staunch proponent of the war, and also he'd been very involved in national defense over the course of the last 30 years in his time in the Senate. He just got back from Ukraine, and then he called President Trump at 6:30 on Saturday night, and around 8 o'clock it was found out that he died. It looks like an aortic tear. 71 years old. So this now, on the political side, this really creates a little bit of a window here. It's going to be difficult for a Democrat to get elected in South Carolina, but the onus is now on the Republicans to select someone as the senator in the interim, and then be ready to rock and roll in November when the elections are held.
This is a good trivia question, but do you know how many senators have occupied that spot since 1954? Because
4?
Lindsey Graham's been in there a long time.
Yeah, he's been in there since 94.
One, other than Lindsey Graham.
Wow.
Strom Thurmond running from 1954 to 2003, and then that yoke got picked up by Lindsey Graham, which is crazy. I mean, and the previous guy I was looking this morning, his last name was Wofford. He was a senator for like 15 minutes. It was like not all of 1954 he was in that Senate spot. So
3 since 1953, 2 since 1954.
Yeah, crazy, right? I mean, remarkably, like, we're still doing the whole thing where we've got, essentially The Walking Dead in the Senate, because Strom Thurmond was kind of originally that guy. It was like, man, this guy is 150 years old and rolling around in a wheelchair in the halls of Congress, and everyone's like, man, this guy's too old. But that was 23 years ago, and we're still doing that whole song and dance. Notably, I will say there's news that Sam Neill, who's the guy who's the main character in Jurassic Park, died this morning, and he was 78. If you had asked me which of these two men is older, I definitely would have said Lindsey Graham. But that's just a total side note. But I saw that this morning. I was like, man, that guy was older than Lindsey Graham. I was like, was it 71 or 81? I went back and looked. I was like, man, weird.
Speaking of Congress, it is interesting. Kevin Warsh is going to be testifying in front of the House tomorrow and the Senate on Wednesday. He's going to be in front of the Financial Services Committee at the House and the similar or comparable Banking Committee in the Senate. Now, I think the Senate, usually you have more fireworks in the House, but in this instance, I think you'll have more fireworks in the Senate because Elizabeth Warren is on the Senate Banking Committee. So I'm curious to see if Kevin Warsh gets pressed on monetary policy. This is not supposed to be about monetary policy, but I'm going to be very much attuned to what is being said in this because, again, I mean, we don't know a ton. We know what Kevin Warsh has said publicly before he became chairman, but we don't really have a lot to go on since the time that he became Fed chairman. And so Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be really interesting as it relates to that.
I guarantee you that Elizabeth Warren is going to hammer him on his personal holdings because she did that during his confirmation hearing. There was a lot of how is he going to unwind his personal investments ahead of being in the Fed. He notably owned a lot of SpaceX, which has since gone public, and Elizabeth Warren tried to stop it going public. So I imagine my guess is where she's going to go off on is that, if I had to guess. Though notably, Tuesday and Wednesday we get big news. We get CPI on Tuesday. We get PPI on Wednesday. So I think that that's going to be a big piece of the conversation too. And at present, we're expected to see a negative print on month-over-month CPI. And I'd be shocked if we don't, because obviously oil prices have come down quite a bit. So we'll see, but I think it's going to be a colder number. I think we may have peaked inflation-wise for the year. So we'll see what it looks like. But I think that's going to be a big topic of conversation.
Speaking of SpaceX, this is a little bit of a tangent and not on the agenda. But yesterday I had the fortune of touring a remarkable manufacturing facility in Seattle that's involved in the space. And I really think that the computer technology, but also the 3D printing technology is something that I had underestimated. We went onto the factory floor. There was maybe 2 people there. And I don't know how big the space. I mean, like maybe 3 Walmarts, supercenters. Is it, like there was a whole rocket in there, and the 3D printing machines were just going. And when I thought of a 3D printing machine, I used to think of, the plastic 3D printers that you have, and it's kind of this, it goes layer by layer and builds like a toy or something. But they're printing steel, laser etching, building layer by layer. It's all additive. And then they just program it in their software and build it, and you don't have welders in there. There's like you're building rockets, and there were 4 welding like terminals.
Yeah,
it was unbelievable. Everything was just housed. It was pristine. The floor was pristine. I mean, we toured a manufacturing facility in Chattanooga, which was not pristine. This was unbelievable, and I really think that it made me see why all of a sudden space is an option, because we now can produce this stuff on demand and you can iterate on it. So if there's a change, it automatically updates throughout the system. So if you change one little bolt and say this bolt actually isn't going to work, you basically have the recipe and it's going to change throughout the system and everyone knows exactly where it is. And you don't have to have little papers running around and update that piece of paper, throw that one out, replace it. So it makes sense to me now, because before it didn't quite make sense. But now why we can be doing this and why so many companies are able to do this when before it was just NASA losing money.
Yeah, I mean, it's private versus public. I mean, we talked about
and the technology is here at the right time, too.
I mean, imagine if the United States government made TVs. No one would have one, or they'd be insanely expensive and running away in terms of cost. I mean, NASA's the same way. I mean, now that it's kind of a game on public space, everybody's innovating. Everyone's bringing the costs down. Everyone's finding ways to get in and out of space in a more efficient manner. I mean, it's the total addressable market. I mean, like when they did the SpaceX thing was like, what is it, 200 trillion or something, some nutty number, but like, it's not impossible. I mean, you start innovating in a way where you suddenly get, I mean, it's almost like what was the total addressable market or the total market value of the United States of America before anyone set foot here. It's kind of unknown, but there's plenty of resources and innovation that can be done because you're going somewhere new. There's finally a new place to expand to. So, I mean, I think it's a really exciting space. What it looks like, I have no idea, but I mean, it's the rate at which things are changing is so fast.
What's changing in retirement portfolios is going to be interesting as well. Now, we've talked a long time about what the real issues are in the U.S. budget and why we're expected to run more deficits and growing deficits going forward. And a lot of it has to do with entitlements. We've really harped on the Medicare side. And we've also talked about Social Security. I've always kind of said, look, entitlements will kind of take care of themselves. We got to be more aggressive on the healthcare pushback on spending, especially with the big HMOs. United Healthcare, Elevance, which interestingly reports later this week. But also there's this issue about Social Security. And Trump said that he is looking, quote, very strongly at Australia's retirement model. And I've always said that the Social Security is actually easier nut to crack because what you can do is you can just push through a payroll tax. No one really sees it. Obviously, companies see it, but you don't have the big populist blowback that you would get if you raise taxes by 6% on every person in the U.S. But that's effectively what raising the what this would do. So the Australian program that Trump said they're looking very strongly at requires employers to contribute 12% of a worker's earnings into tax-favored retirement accounts managed largely by private funds, think BlackRock or Vanguard. And this would obviously put more money. Right now, I think it's like 6%. So this would effectively double the employer contribution for Social Security. And I think instantly you have those deficit problems solved. And I'm curious what the response would be from Americans in general. I think that there's a big resistance to raising taxes. I think small businesses would really be hurt. Maybe Trump can argue that he's adjusting that by allowing for tax breaks for accelerated depreciation and just lowered corporate taxes in general. But I'm curious to see but at the same time, if they knew that, okay, well, the deficit's solved, would that be a trade-off that Americans are willing to make? And maybe, Tom, I'm curious of your thought, American people and then American businesses.
I mean, I think the larger the business, the less of a headwind this is. My immediate thought is, obviously, my wife being a hairstylist, you don't have a lot of cost of goods sold, and you're just going to get hammered on taxes. I mean, that's kind of the thing. I think that the individual sole proprietorship who now is getting saddled with increased taxes, but don't have a ton of write-offs. That's kind of where I think the hardest piece is. But that's also like, you think about things like maternity leave. They're like, oh, everyone deserves 5 years of maternity leave. It's like, all right, well, if you're a self-employed female hairstylist, where is that going to come from? And so I think that's where it's going to benefit the most people as a result of the fact that most people are employed by either the government or a large company. The smallest individual businesses that could be very profitable are going to see this as a major headwind, would be my expectation. And but at the same time, they probably got the least amount of lobbying power because they'd all have to get together and, while running their business, try and figure out a way to get preferential benefits or change the way they're treated in that situation. So I'm not really sure how it works.
I mean, it almost seems to me like it's going to be another hit for the service, like the capital light, people focused service businesses that are already getting hit a little bit by AI. I mean, I think lawyers, accountants, taxes, frankly, our industry as well. I mean, our bill of materials is essentially dominated by payroll costs.
Yeah.
And so you're increasing that by 6%. That's a big amount.
Yeah.
So
I'd be more in favor of if we did away with payroll taxes and that 12% went into your IRA. Mm-hmm. I think that would be far more of an unlock of both wealth and profitability.
Yeah.
But, they say like, hey, if you're
And I actually kind of wonder if that's what this is aiming to do.
Yeah, like if you say like anyone who's under the age of 15 and is not legally allowed to work, you're done with Social Security. But as soon as you begin working, there is an account at the Social Security Administration where every time you earn $1.12 goes in there.
Yep.
All the way through your career, you'd end up with a ton of money.
And I think that is what and I probably I should have emphasized that as well. I think that so this happened during a Trump account discussion.
Yeah.
And so he said, we're doing this for the kids. We want to do something from the adults. We're looking at Australia's model very strongly.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the thing, because if that's the thing is Al Gore talking about the lockbox. But if it really was a lockbox, it's like every dollar of Social Security that I paid in goes to me. That would be unbelievable. And then if you add on top of the fact that you could do a 401k, you could continue to do all these things. And even if that money became pensionized, so it's like 12 cents goes into my lockbox, theoretically, and I'm paid out a Social Security benefit that's based on my earnings over my lifetime, and then I get hit by a bus at 68, then that money goes out of the lockbox perhaps and then covers other benefits for other people or covers a shortfall. But there's going to be so many people where that's going to be the excess. I mean, that's basically how insurance works.
And it's essentially
like the idea is it's Social Security insurance, SSI. And the idea would be like, it covers me until I die. But then after I die, I don't get any insurance benefit. The insurance company makes that money, put that into a larger fund that covers other things. And that would be, I think that's actually why is that not the way Social Security works? I don't know. It goes all into a pool and then they pay it out. When you get to the end, they're like, oh, we already gave it to somebody else. Sorry. Yeah, I
mean, it's added transparency if we do it that way.
Yeah. Did I just solve Social Security?
Man, heard it here first. It's another red day for memory stocks. You've heard this before. SK Hynix shares down 15%, the most on record. The Kospi index was down 9%, triggered a market-wide trading suspension last night. I mean, it's just every single day it's the opposite. I mean, Friday was an incredible day for SK Hynix. Stock was up 13% because they listed ADRs here in the US, and now they're reversing all of that today. I think some of it's people trading out of the shares in Korea and into the shares in the US. But on the underlying basis, I actually think that we have some better news in terms of AI not necessarily hitting a wall. We have a table here on the net revenue for Taiwan Semiconductor, up 68% in the month of June, admittedly over an easy comp, but that's going to allow them to hit their quarterly numbers. And then Meta is boosting its Louisiana data center plans by $50 billion, adding another 5 gigawatts, taking it to 15 gigawatts. Why in Louisiana? Well, it's got very abundant and cheap natural gas. I actually think you probably have more abundant, cheap natural gas in Louisiana than you do in Texas on a like a per acre basis. It's incredible. Louisiana is not good for oil, so historically Louisiana hasn't benefited to the degree that Texas has because oil is a much more valuable commodity. But maybe this helps Louisiana. Maybe help some of our Shreveport bonds. I
mean, it could certainly help time travel because everyone knows it takes 1.21 gigawatts to travel through time. And provided you're going at 88 miles an hour. Go.
And then OpenAI and Apple. This is a interesting news story that kind of broke on Friday. Apple is a bunch of killers. They really are. Steve Jobs declared thermonuclear war, and he used that term on Google when Google came out with Android in 2010, said they're basically stealing their product. And Tim Cook is doing the same with OpenAI. So he's accusing OpenAI that they've been stealing Apple's trade secrets, and they allege that a more junior employee used Apple's employees' login to access Apple servers while now at OpenAI. They also said that OpenAI's hardware chief, Tang Tan, solicited trade secrets from its employees interviewing for jobs and encouraged them to bring, quote, actual parts from Apple to show and tell sessions at OpenAI. So Tim Cook, I once spoke with the CEO of a company who was selling for Broadcom, and Tim Cook was the chief operating officer at Apple at the time, and said that he will never do business with Tim Cook because he's a backstabber. And to which I thought to myself, this is, I mean, that may be true. You may not want a relationship with Apple, but Apple's the 800-pound gorilla, and they're not afraid to, and they know that. And so they're now using that power against OpenAI.
I mean, that's kind of been the playbook for tech companies all along the way.
Yep.
And now I think that if anything shows that there's a real threat for the first time in a while to Apple. I mean, obviously the Android was the first one. And I would argue that still Apple still dominates Android. It feels like, at least in terms of just handsets, but it's game on now. And I'd be interested to see how this develops over the next few months, few years, because OpenAI, I feel like is fading. Their balloon is dropping while there are a lot of other balloons rising in the AI space, and it might be just the first mover's disadvantage for them.
Yep. This week, obviously, we have the CPI, the PPI. Kevin Warsh is testifying. We also get earnings announcements coming out. We get a flurry of bank earnings announcements tomorrow, so that'll be a big market mover. If you have any questions, please let us know, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.